Okay, so this week's discussion is on the cognitive load theory. And I read the article, and it was pretty heavy, but I think basically the idea is along the lines of our brains work differently. And because I wanted to have a better understanding of this, I went and searched cognitive load theory. And I came up with a couple of articles that explained it a bit for me. Let me see. Cognitive load theory suggests that learning happens best under conditions that are aligned with human cognitive architecture. In other words, the way that we think best is the way that we learn best, which makes sense. As a mother of 3 children, I know that all 3 of them think and act differently. As a teacher of a lot of students, I know that they think and learn differently, especially in the area of middle school. So that sort of gave me some ideas. And then specifically with instructional design, I found this really nice article that thankfully was translated, because evidently the original was in French, that says that one of the most important aspects of any e-learning course design is to ensure that the information being offered is not only understood by the learner, but that they are also able to retain that information for future use. As such, a successful instructional designer must always be aware of the learning techniques being utilized, the amount of data included, and the structure in which the knowledge has been distilled, then dispersed. For this very reason, understanding the basics of the cognitive load theory and applying them to your instructional design is an absolute must, particularly if you want your e-learners to actually learn. So it broke it down into what was short-term and long-term, short-term and working memory, that you can only retain a certain amount of information there. And the more information that is delivered, sometimes more likely that the students will not actually learn what is being taught if they get too much, or if it's not in the right format for them. So cognitive load, they broke it down into 3 types: intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. So intrinsic is that it's inherently involved in certain tasks or materials. Some activities are harder to learn and to master than others. Extraneous is it consists of non-relevant, unimportant elements such as activities, instructional materials that make the learners use their mental processes, like using a graph for extra information or something like that. And germane, which means that they enable the learners to devote their cognitive mental resources to the learning process and help facilitate the development of the learner's knowledge base. So applying it in the classroom, it says basically keep it simple, use different instructional techniques, and do it in bite size. And I tend to do that. I tend to teach things in what I call little bites. Little bit of information to add on to the next information. The way I teach in the classroom is that I use a combination of things. I use pictures, I use puzzles, I use anything and everything that I can think of or find that might help the students understand what it is that they're learning. Sometimes when I have them do an oral report, I will tell them they can use anything as long as it connects to them. It may connect to somebody else. So I've had them use things like to talk about ribosomes in the cell. Somebody will come in with nerds, the little candies, and talk about how they're just little teeny tiny round things, and nerds works. I know that personally for me, sometimes I can't visualize something. So I need to have it described to me in a specific way. If someone gives me directions to a location, do not tell me the roads or, go north, south, east, or west. You have to give me picture things. I have to have buildings. I have to have signs. I have to have something that I can tie into my memory bank, and it will actually connect with something there, and I can go from point A to point B to point C. If you give me a list of roads or directional north, south, east, west, then it becomes an overload for me. I cannot function with that at all. I cannot do it. I will not do it. I grab my GPS, punch in the address, and thank the Lord there's GPS, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do it. So I think that's basically what they're talking about. My understanding is it's how we learn things, how we are able to bring it into our working memory and tie it in and load it in toward the changes for our long-term memory. So, thank you. Have a wonderful, blessed week.